Let's go ahead and get started. So hi, everybody. My name is Neha Kumar. I'm SIGCHAI president. And today we have our open session on volunteering. And this is something that we've been talking about and thinking about a lot over recent months, maybe even a couple of years, just looking at the challenges when it comes to volunteering. So how we volunteer, how transparent these avenues are for volunteering within SIGCHAI at various stages, and also what are the various stages of volunteering, as well as, when there are challenges that arise, how do we resolve those issues. So these are the types of things that we've been hearing about, we've been listening about, but we also wanted to do a kind of a brainstorming session with folks in the community. So just trying to open it out more broadly. So this week we're doing 2 open sessions. Today's is, now it's 9 p.m. Universal time and 5 p.m. East Coast time, which is where Priya and I both are. And then we have another session, which is on Friday. And leading this session is Priya Kumar, who's our chair for volunteer support. And she'll be kind of leading this conversation, and then also consolidating findings from this session and from the next session into a blog post that we can all then have access to. So with that, Priya, I'll let you get started, and I'm going to share my screen and your slides.
Excellent. Thank you, Neha, for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Since we have, so I'm going to sort of present a little bit for a few minutes on volunteering across SIGCHAI, but then our plan is to spend the bulk of the session actually brainstorming together, and we do have a Google Doc for that. But in the meantime, since we're a small enough group, I'm thinking if everyone feels comfortable, you can add your, name, your affiliation, anything you think would be good for us to know. Basically, introduce yourself in the chat, and then maybe when we get to the brainstorming time and actually talking, we can introduce by verbally to the group, since we're a small enough group. But I'll go ahead and get started. So if we can go to the next slide. So as with most of our, or as with all of our gatherings, this session, which is also being recorded, FYI for everyone, is governed by our code of conduct, which is available on the website here. And I can also very quickly, place it, add it in the chat, just so everyone can quickly get there if you have any questions about that. So next slide. All right, so as many of you will probably know, since you heard about this session, our plan for today is to discuss how volunteering takes place across SIGCHAI. And the idea, kind of one of the guiding question here, is maybe that you've heard that SIGCHAI is a volunteer-driven organization, but what does that mean in practice? What are the various volunteering opportunities? What are we as a SIGCHAI EC sort of focusing on when it comes to volunteering? And then, most important, what do you all as members of the community want to see us doing, want to see change, want to see get better? Essentially, how can we better align volunteer work in all of the forms that it takes with our core values? Next slide. And so I think, given that we want to make that alignment, it's worth highlighting sort of what are our kind of guiding visions, or what is it that we as an EC and as a community are sort of striving towards. And so these are our sort of missions, goals, and part of that includes, co-creating guidelines and best practices for infrastructuring accessible, safe, sustainable, and equitable spaces for knowledge production. Of course, that absolutely includes our conferences, our chapters, our community gatherings, since a lot of that work takes place in those spaces. to provide avenues for support and mentorship of our community and all of those who participate in generating knowledge. Again, part of being a volunteer is contributing to the community and, but also growing your own professional experiences, but also even your personal networks. I mean, a lot of people are doing this because we also have friends who do this. And we want that kind of connection and growth. And to facilitate mutual learning across communities, crossing regional, cultural, institutional, disciplinary, and other borders. So I like starting with this because it gives us a sense of, what is the North Star, so to speak, that many of us are working toward. And so then, especially when we're doing our sort of brainstorming, and also to help you all sort of think for the next few minutes as I will talk through some things, you can think about and start to brainstorm, in what ways are we maybe close to these, and in what ways do we have work to do? And we can talk about those. All right, next slide. So I really wanted to make sure we spent a few minutes talking about, well, what does it, again, we're a volunteer-driven organization. What does that mean? What do we actually do? What are the different avenues or forms of volunteering? And the way that I have been thinking about it is in a couple of different groups. So two areas are here, and then there's a third on the next slide. So as many of you are probably familiar, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is our conferences and the volunteer work that goes into conferences. So SIGCHI is a family. We sponsor and help to organize 26 conferences. And those have a variety of roles, but I'm drawing here on Aaron Quigley in a volunteering presentation he gave, kind of talked about these two big areas in conference volunteer roles. So programming, that's all of the content stuff, reviewing papers, helping to put together the technical program, and then logistics work. And so that's all of the stuff that goes into making the event happen, whether in person or virtual or hybrid. And these roles also span everything from, reviewing a paper all the way up to being sort of, technical program chair or general chair, as well, and from sort of being a student volunteer all the way up to chairing the whole conference and kind of being the person where the buck stops here, kind of. The other important thing to note is that these volunteer opportunities are managed by, well, the people who are organizing the conference manage these opportunities. And so oftentimes, if you want to get involved in a specific conference, the conference organizers are the best point of contact. But we do have an EC point, an executive committee point of contact who oversees conferences, and that is Susanna Bull. So conferences, of course, is probably one of the most common avenues that we think of for volunteering. But we also do have chapters, and these are our local sort of organizations in communities all around the world. So we have more than 68 local chapters across 36 countries. I think it's something like 4,000 members. And there are, professional and student chapters, local and regional chapters, and they hold events, foster community, really kind of cultivate the SIGCHI and HCI communities in the places where they're based. And so those roles are often volunteer roles in the chapters are often related to running events, creating, doing community building activities, things like that. And again, if you're interested in getting involved in the chapter, the best place to start is, of course, with that local chapter and with the chapter organizers. But we also do have an EC point of contact there, and that is Matt Jones. So if you're interested in sort of broader questions about volunteering in chapters, Matt would also be a good place to go. Next slide. And so our third avenue for volunteering is, of course, with the SIGCHI Executive Committee and all of the work that the EC does. And so we have a number of committees that take on a lot of different tasks and manage a lot of different processes. And that is another avenue to get involved and to volunteer. And my sense is perhaps that might be, it might, part of why we're holding this session is also, I'm excited to sort of share this because I think that might be one of the volunteering avenues that's sort of the least understood or least kind of, how does that happen, or what goes on there, or what can I do there? And so we have a variety of committees that sort of take on these different kinds of roles, I guess. And part of this is committees that are supporting functional areas of the executive committee. So this is, we have an EC member who is the, chair of accessibility or chair of sustainability, and they have a committee that supports them. And this is those bullet points list which committees there are and which ones are in formation. I, as the volunteer support chair, will be spinning up a committee as well. So if you are super fired up about this conversation that we're going to be having, let me know if you want to get involved in this capacity. We also have committees that help to implement SIG-Chi programs. So this is things like a committee that administers and manages the Gary Marsden Awards, the SIG-Chi Development Fund, the SIG-Chi Awards. And so that's another avenue to get involved, and especially if you're somebody who's received one of these awards, a way to kind of pay it forward. We also have committees that are dedicated to supporting the SIG-Chi community. So this is things like SIG-Chi Cares and the Research Ethics Committee. And then we have a number of committees that relate to the community itself and expanding, extending, and envisioning the community and where it's going. So this includes things like the Latin America Community Committee, the Asia Committee. We have a Futuring Committee and MedChi committees that are in formation. So this is just to give you a very quick sense of all of the different volunteer opportunities that exist also within kind of the SIG-Chi EC and executive committee and the activities that we're all doing. All right, next slide. So the other thing that I really want to highlight and encourage you to think about, since all of you are SIG-Chi members, and I would venture to guess that all of you have volunteered in some capacity, probably multiple capacities of all of the different things that I mentioned. And I think it's really important, it's something that has helped me think about all of this stuff, is really thinking about volunteering as a pathway and an ongoing pathway. So it's not just something you do once, especially when you are sort of part of a community. You'll take on a variety of roles. There might be up and down experiences, but it's also something to think about. Just like I'm sure many of you are used to thinking about your professional trajectories, whether you're in academia, industry, nonprofit, things like that, and envisioning where you want to go there. And I would encourage you to think about, if you're thinking about deepening your volunteer experience or wondering, hey, where can I contribute? Of course, there's lots of different ways to contribute, but it is also a journey, just like your profession itself is a journey. And so I encourage you and a few other kind of SIG-Chi EC members, and also others who've been in organizing roles, have sort of talked through their pathway. I mean, I know Aaron Quigley has sort of a volunteering talk that's on YouTube, and he talked through his pathway. And so that's a useful place to even think about, what has your pathway been so far and where do you want that to go? And so just to give one very quick example of myself and my own pathway, most of it has been through conference activities. So, being a conference attendee, that's a part of being in the community, being a peer reviewer, that's probably a big way where people contribute, being a student volunteer, being a PC member, being a session chair. And so, helping to create the conference program, helping to run the conference. Again, there are chapter opportunities, which I myself haven't taken advantage of. And then now sort of this role on the EC. And so trying to broaden, going beyond our conference work, and really, at least for me, I really wanted to think about the community itself. So I encourage you to think about, what has your pathway been and where do you want it to go, and use that to kind of guide how you approach volunteering in SIG-Chi. And I'm happy to sort of chat more about that too. Next slide. So I want to sort of also make sure that we talk a little bit about, having sort of laid the broad vision of the EC of SIG-Chi, talked about all of the different pathways through volunteering within the community. I wanted to talk a little bit about all of the avenues that sort of we've been working on and cultivating, again, to help the community thrive, which is what I really see my role as as doing. What are the conditions that we need to help the community, the volunteer community, the volunteer-driven nature of the organization thrive? And so, that I think it's one of the things that's been really important for us, is sort of our approach to volunteering has been through open calls. So saying, you know, we as an EC are recruiting people for an equity committee or for a volunteering committee, and inviting people to submit, to, you know, send us a little bit of information about themselves. But also, if you're interested just in sort of volunteering, but aren't necessarily sure in what capacity, still giving you a forum where you can voice that. And then we have a pool of people who's really interested in volunteering. So again, emphasizing that kind of like open approach. So it's not just, oh, my friend, you know, who I know might be a really good fit for this, but rather making this a more open process so that people who want to get involved have a way to do that, even if they don't necessarily know who to contact. We've also used things like these open sessions, the equity talks, as modes of communication, making sure that we are creating spaces for the community to come together, making sure that we are giving people a forum to share that, you know, share their thoughts and brainstorm together. We also have a number of working groups that are, you know, smaller, more focused groups that are focusing on a specific aspect that involves the volunteer community. So we recently have been creating a hybrid working group focused on hybrid conferencing, exchanging best practices around that. We have SIGCHI Cares that that addresses a lot of, you know, what if people have any issues or concerns, or want to really talk through difficult experiences, you know, we have a group to really support people through that. And then we have, you know, to continue sort of conversing with the community, or at least sort of sharing where we're going and what we're thinking about it. We have written outputs like we're working on a Community Square article for interactions about volunteering and burnout, because I know that's certainly a concern. I'll be writing a blog post summarizing these open sessions. And so, you know, as a form of communication, but kind of as also as a form of documentation, of documenting what kind of feedback we're hearing from people and where we're going. And then finally here, we also have some policies and documentation related to volunteering that are things that previous ECs have worked on and that we are, you know, are continuing as well. So there's a volunteer articulation, which is a document that any, you know, people, conference organizers or people who are in volunteering roles, especially if you're bringing people on into volunteering positions, can use that as a way to sort of set, here are the roles, here are the expectations and the responsibilities, to sort of provide a little bit more clarity on what it is that people are expecting. And then also a volunteer handbook, again, with more of that information. And we can, I'll certainly put the links in the chat, but those are available for anyone to look at. And yeah, so these are just a few of the opportunities that the EC has been working toward to really, again, help to foster a safer, more sustainable, and more equitable community. But, you know, those are always, things like that are always a work in progress. And so that's one of the reasons why we really value opportunities like this to hear from people and get ideas from the community. Because again, not only are we a volunteer-driven community, meaning volunteers keep us going, but volunteers are also, their feedback is what informs where the community is going to go. And that piece is also really important. And so kind of with that, I think this is the last slide of the next one. These are, so that's my spiel. That's the talking part of our session. So we have 40 minutes now for the open part of this open session. Time for brainstorming. I do know that was a lot, so, you know, take a little bit to take a moment to sort of absorb some of that. But these are some ideas that we, you know, brainstorming questions that we've come up with. But certainly if there's anything that I mentioned before that you want to talk through or get more information on, or, you know, provide feedback on, definitely let us know. And so we have, did I change this? Yes, I did. Okay, so here is a Google Doc that we have created. So feel free, that should be accessible to anyone with the link. So feel free to, these questions are in there as well. So add, you know, just hop into the document, feel free to add your thoughts there. You can also add them in the chat here in Zoom, and we'll, you know, we'll be capturing all of the notes. But kind of with that, you know, just to mention, the questions that we have here are, or the ideas for brainstorming are challenges. What are some of the pressing problems or issues that you see in relation to volunteering with FOR and SIGCHI? And then also recommendations. So what can, if you have ideas, what can SIGCHI and the EC do to improve or strengthen the volunteering experience? And also what can individuals and communities in SIGCHI do to strengthen the experience? So again, these are just kind of questions to get us started, but with that, I will open up the floor.
So I'm going to stop sharing because that way it's easier for us to see each other. Okay.
Yeah. And also you can feel free to talk. We are sort of taking notes. So if it's easier for you, or if you would rather just start to brainstorm ideas verbally, that's also totally fine.
I guess one question I also have is, those of you who are here, who joined us today, what brings you here? Like what motivated you to join? Or what were you thinking you would see in this call?
I don't know how well you can hear me. I'm on a train. So hi, my name is Dr. Chris Fennell. I saw this email, and I've been a part of SIGCHI for, with conferences and stuff for the past 7 years through my PhD program. But now that I'm in industry, or I still have sort of a industry, or I guess what I was looking for is I understood volunteering as a student, but I don't know what it means to be on the other side of things now. And so I was kind of hoping, I was like, oh, where are the areas we can volunteer? Where is it? Because I still serve as, I've served as, poster chair and paper chair and all that stuff. But now I know that there are these other volunteer opportunities that I kind of like, whether it's helping out at a conference or organization. So just trying to figure out what the opportunities are. So yeah, that's kind of why I joined. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling, so I'll stop.
Oh, and where did you say you were working now? Sorry.
I work at Walmart Global Technology, but I came out of Michigan State University at the Communication Arts and Sciences School in the Information School.
Ooh, okay.
Sorry.
I think that's great. Also, I want to mention, tangential to this session, but we're setting up a partnerships committee. I don't know if you've seen any mention of that, but that's basically a big part of that is actually to build out our practitioner focus, because we have a lot of academia focus and we have a lot of research focus, but we don't have enough activities that really focus on the practitioner side of things. And we've been working on that over the last year, but also Susan Dray had put out a call for this, and has recruited some members already, but that's also a space where hopefully there'll be more avenues to get involved.
Yeah, that sounds great. What committee did you call it so I could write it down?
We called it partnerships.
Okay. So
yeah, but the main motivation was to have like research and practice come closer together.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. Jerry, did you want to speak? I know you.
I just posted in the chat. I don't know that I have any really enlightening things to say, but I just came to continue to learn. I've volunteered a bit, and there continue to be challenges and issues with regards to volunteering, and so always looking at ways to improve myself and the organizations that I work with. I have noticed that there have been a lot of less willingness to take on extra work, especially post-pandemic, during and afterwards. So
why do you think it continues post-pandemic? I don't know if we are fully post-pandemic, but why do you think it continues?
That is a good point. I don't know that we are either, but I think it's just people. I think there are a couple of things. One is that I think there's a natural realignment of priorities, and people are trying to conserve energy and have to consolidate their efforts. And it's not necessarily an unexpected thing, right? But it's a necessary thing for some people. And then I think that's internally, like within their work, but there's also a reevaluation of what their external commitments are and how they want to interact beyond just the work environment.
Mhm. I also wonder if it feels safer now to say no to volunteering opportunities because we've gone through the pandemic and that experience.
Yeah, that I think that's part of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I'm thinking a lot about, and definitely want to hear from the others. But I'm really glad you brought this up, Jerry, because that word sustainable in sort of creating, what did I say, safer, sustainable, equitable communities. I've been, especially with the pandemic, I've been thinking about that word sustainable, and I think one of the big things that the pandemic made it impossible for us to ignore, hopefully, is just kind of the unsustainability of a lot of our work processes and practices. But then now sort of in this role and in this capacity and thinking about what that means from an organizational perspective. So if you're a volunteer driven organization and again, to sort of put it bluntly, and then a lot of people are saying no, which is on the one hand, great if people are really kind of, restructuring their priorities or realizing I was overcommitted and I need to not do that to myself. I need to not burn myself out. That's really valuable and important. But then what do we do as what happens to the community itself? Because then that means if you sort of play that out, then it means that we might have to be okay with getting less done. And I guess that's one option. Or, how do we structure the volunteer work or sort of the things that we need to get done around the fact that perhaps those practices weren't very sustainable before, and it's a great thing that they're moving in that direction, but that might also mean that, we as aspects of the community, we have to say, well, maybe we can't get, not that we can't get as much done, but we have to really rethink how do we get stuff done if we don't have as many people, or if we're, and that's not even counting, I'm thinking about sort of the conference side and how every time I feel like I go to a conference and they say, well, our so many more people are submitting and we're growing, which is great on the one hand because it shows interest, but then also not the most sustainable if you're growing at a pace that's faster than you can find people to manage the work.
Yeah, I think those are great thoughts, Priya. I think one of the challenges that I've seen from the pandemic and just the committees that I've served on in the past since COVID is the hybrid model actually felt like it made more work. And it was one thing to adjust to a remote model, right? We tried to make it work, and various communities, both IEEE and other security communities that I'm a part of. But I remember thinking, I'm doing so much. I'm already reviewing. I'm already going to the conference and helping out with the attendance or other things. And I kept thinking, I can't do that. So the past 2 years since COVID, I haven't even helped out with the normal review process just because it's too much. And so this is the first year that I've really started to get back into things. And there are other things too. I was working on my dissertation, so trying to finish that as well. But at the same time, I remember thinking the hybrid is we're going into it. We're still going to have a remote option, which is good, but that's almost double the work for some things, some areas that I've seen. And I don't know, maybe anyone else who's ever served can sort of echo those sentiments, but or not. I don't know. So sort of burnout, I guess, back to fatigue. I think you had said that earlier. So.
I mean, in order to distribute activities better, I mean, because presumably that might be something that helps the community. How could we do that, right? So providing support for volunteering, providing resources, what kinds of resources might they be, or just being really transparent about volunteering opportunities. I don't know if they seem to be transparent enough, but how do we distribute the work better?
I mean, I guess the model that I've seen is always we rely heavily on graduate students or students, you know, who have more ample time, who want to get involved. But I don't know if that's always the case, right? Like they have their own resources without, you know, we talk about diversity and inclusion, and sometimes they are working so much they don't get to enjoy the conference or whatever that they're part of. And I guess I'm really conference focused because that's my experience. I don't know about the chapters or the other aspects of it too, but I think the way I would see volunteering is limiting the volunteer to more smaller roles. Maybe it's just helping out with the attendance booth or checking in booth. I don't know. That I think that's a really difficult question. Maybe other people will talk about it.
And yeah, thank you, Chris. Just since there's a couple of comments here, I can read those out. So Vicky says, I was excited to see the calls for volunteering, but wondered if there are rolling calls or are there firm deadlines? Priya, you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. That is a great question and actually speaks to sort of, I think, one of the real powers of the open call process. So there are, at least for the EC position, so things like the different committees that EC members are creating, oftentimes we'll put out a call via the open calls and then through our SIGCHI channels. And oftentimes that there is the sort of for best consideration, please fill out this form and let us know of your interest by a certain date. But, and so for those, there is a little bit of a time element to that. But there are, part of why we really value the open calls process is it also, the form itself is always available. And so you can, after this meeting, in fact, you can go and sort of enter your information and indicate, I think there's, you know, a bunch of different, there's a list of things you can check off or think about. Where would you be interested in volunteering? And then when we on the EC, the executive committee, have the kinds of tasks that come up, we'll say, you know, oh, such and such needs help with this task, or, you know, managing the website, or wants to create a survey or something like that. And then we can look and see, oh, is there somebody who said that they were interested in volunteering and has that skill set? The one thing I would encourage people to do when you're doing that is, and this is also why I talked about the volunteering pathway, is to really think about what your skill set is, or where you want to contribute, or what you want to do. Because one sort of piece of advice is, we have sometimes people will like check off many things, or check off everything on the list. And sometimes that is, my sense is that sort of demonstrating a willingness to just volunteer. But then if you're thinking about what is the most helpful thing, if you sort of check off the few things that you're really focused on, or the few, you know, the skills that you really want to emphasize, that helps us to say, oh, this person would be a really good fit for this particular volunteering role. So think about, you know, if you're not responding to a specific call, think about what might be the best ways that you can contribute, and then indicate that on the form. And then I also see, you know, Josh's comment, as a newer SIGCHI member, just started my PhD program at Rutgers. Welcome to graduate school. I am interested in seeing if there are ways to get more visibility around these opportunities, given that I don't always have time to log in. Yeah, great question. I think our main channel, so often when we have a specific, like somebody, like when I'm going to create my volunteering committee. So we will send, we'll send emails out on the listserv. If you use Twitter, you know, follow us on Twitter. We have Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then obviously on our website, on the open calls. So those are at least right now, those are kind of the channels that we have. But I would definitely ask you kind of, are there other channels that would be helpful for you, or sort of what do you think would be helpful in terms of finding out about these opportunities?
I think the big thing for me is, especially just as I had started trying to figure out what are all the different opportunities, like even seeing the one slide that you'd presented, there are so many different opportunities, and how do we go about looking at those? And there are certain ones that are fit for professors and individuals who have been with SIG for many, many years, and others that are open for more junior members of the group. So I think it's trying to distill through, like, even for when you join the student chapter, maybe in that blast, send out something like, here are a list of catered student oriented roles that you could look into as time evolves, and things that you could start considering in your willingness to volunteer. Because I probably won't be on an awards committee anytime soon, but there are opportunities for me in the short term where I could jump in and enable someone who might want to take a higher opportunity to jump up.
Yeah, no, I like that. And it speaks to, I have heard from some other students as well, and especially for students who either started or sort of, for people who were students during the pandemic, that really interrupted, their ability to meet people in the community, to go to conferences in person, meet people in the community and find out about those opportunities. But even pandemic aside, I think this point that you're raising about, it's an idea of sort of, when new people come into the community, how do they learn about not just, the overview that I gave of kind of, these are all the different avenues of volunteering, but that's a really good point of sort of, what are the best ways for me in the role or career, in the career stage I am right now. And so being able to provide a sense of like, oh, if you're a student, here are the kinds of things that are available to you, rather than having to rely on, somebody in your PhD program telling you that kind of information.
I'll just quickly mention, so Josh, one of the committees that we recently formed is the Futuring Committee. And I think they recruited a bunch of people. So they're not actively looking right now, but probably will be in a few months. But this is actually a committee that was formed specifically for students and early career scholars, because there aren't any explicit opportunities for students to get involved in these committees. But I think you're right that we could do more to clarify which career stage is being sought after through whatever opportunities we have. So let me actually also share a link to the article that talks about the Futuring Committee.
Aaron, Morten, anyone else, feel free to chime in if you have any ideas. Or
yeah, I can give it a go. So I basically joined just to get a feel for where is all the volunteering work going at the moment. I've been running the local SIG Kai community in Denmark since back in '99, something like that. So it's been a long time going, and volunteering is going up and down. And there is definitely, as also mentioned, the trend these days that the younger generation are maybe a little less loyal to one specific cause. So it's definitely easier to attract volunteers for a short job, unless you have some way of getting people into the organization. So if you have a running committee, for example, we have a running every year conference that requires a lot of volunteer work, and it requires a lot of making sure that you always supplement the committee or the members of the volunteer group. So you have new people coming in and old people still in there teaching the new ones what is best practice and how can you do things easier and still be very open to evolving the concept and bringing new ideas in.
Mhm.
So it's very much a question of kind of maintaining the community. And we have also had that for a long time. We have had a local chapter meeting at the CHI conference. I don't know if it's still going on, but it's been running where all the local chapters officers can meet at the CHI conference and exchange experiences. That's always very helpful for everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that what that speaks to is also that two things come to mind. One is sort of articulating the benefits of being a volunteer beyond the sort of, resume building networking stuff, but that really, that true kind of not just knowledge sharing, but connection, community, mentorship aspect. And that's something that, obviously younger, students or early career people might really understand how that is valuable and helpful, but also, more established members of the community being able to pass on that information, I think is something that's really worth highlighting as a benefit or a reason why you volunteer. And now I've forgotten the other point, but it'll come back to me.
But there's definitely a lot of tacit knowledge in there,
Yeah.
and it's very, very difficult to make sure that everything is explicit.
Mhm.
And even if you try to, it becomes difficult to update and keep maintaining. So very often it's easier to have these kind of human to human communication channels where you can exchange ideas and get to know who should I talk to regarding this and this. So I haven't done this before, but you can ask this person that has been doing it before and are willing to help. So we kind of train the volunteers to also train other volunteers and make sure that it's a building community.
Yeah.
I think to that point, right? I mean, even on the EC end and basically about information pertinent to Sakai, we've been rethinking our website and just how to make it less static, more dynamic. So if we have part of it as like a wiki that can be updated more actively, maybe have places where people can contribute as well, maybe that would make it more of a live website rather than a place where people go and, you always have to keep generating new content. I don't know. Yeah, I think I think it is quite detailed. Wait, sections on reviews. Which section?
Oh, there were like these for reviewers, guidelines for reviewers and so on. That's there on the website. That's pretty detailed and it refers to Ken Fickley, or I forget his full name, but that paper from mobile HCI on reviewing and all that other things. Yeah, Ken Hink. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty good. Like I was kind of surprised because when I was submitting for CHI, I never read through some of those sections like myself, the websites.
Could you share a link to this? Because I don't know which page you're
Yeah,
referring
sure.
to. That would be
Yep.
I didn't know we had information on reviewing on our website. So there you go. But a lot of the stuff that we're posting in terms of volunteering opportunities, we keep updating the submittable page. So whenever we have, for instance, we have a call out now for awards committee members, because each year we replenish the awards committee. And so that's live right now. There's also the more general open call that Priya mentioned.
And I just put the link. I meant to put it earlier when I was responding to Vicky's question. This is the link to the open calls. At the bottom of that, if you click on open call for volunteering, that's the one that I was talking about with Vicky. But that kind of makes me wonder between our own way. I'm glad that the reviewing information is helpful. And I think that's one area I'm actually pleasantly surprised and glad that we haven't talked a lot about reviewing, because I know in some of the previous sessions when we've talked about, I forget, I was looking at one of the equity talks, maybe it was the mentorship one, and that one ended up focusing a lot on reviewing. I mean, we were in the very thick of the pandemic, and so those concerns were very front and center. But I actually do think there's lots of issues with the reviewing process for sure. And certainly when it comes to sort of volunteer labor, but I have seen many of these kinds of reviewing guides. And I think it's a huge issue, but I know there's a lot of people are working on and thinking about how to address that at various levels. And so going back to Morten, when you were talking about that knowledge transfer, I'm wondering, are there, just sort of in all of your experiences, though, for those of you who are more experienced, and then also for those of you who are interested, newer to the community and interested in learning how things work, I'm wondering, are there what aspects of, whether it's conferences or other aspects of the community, kind of what aspects of the community and how it works are the harder ones to translate or transfer to people? I don't know if my question's not coming out exactly right, but I'm thinking, like, we have a lot of documentation, sort of guides for reviewing and how to sort of do a good review and things like that. But what are the processes that perhaps need to be better documented or are harder to convey to people?
I think one thing sometime back I was trying to look up for kind of a meta-analysis of how the transparency of the papers and like the statistics, whether there is how they deal with like the p-values and so on. And we were trying to look at this a graph on the ACM website, I think, or was it the SIGCHI website itself, which was pretty detailed on the financial specifics of papers, I think. I will try to find that link as well. But so some level of meta analyses of the papers that have been over the years. I see there's a very good blog on the website right now, and it's some discussions in that direction might be helpful.
Are you talking about the publication fee? So the cost of publication?
Yeah, I think that was cost of publications, I think. I'll find that link, exact link. It was on ACM SIGCHI, yeah.
Yeah, I just shared the link to the post by Julie Williamson.
Yeah, this is also kind of the same details, but that had also a picture like of that, which was good. I'll just try to find that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be on the SIGCHI.org website actually, because I remember at some point we were struggling to get tables onto the Medium posts. So maybe the table is in there. Okay, so we have 10 minutes, I guess. How would we like to wrap up? Do we want a wish list of things to look into?
So Priya asked about what to do with the difficult ones, and that those are by definition difficult to identify because people don't know what it is. So I would actually encourage to make sure that we have, or that you provide open sessions where people who are interested in learning about or have heard, or just open, not committed sessions. You don't have to sign up for anything, but just get to know about what is going on. Those kind of sessions, and making them available and advertising them. So you have a way of getting to meet other people in the crowd, because
Mm.
that's kind of the only way that you can really educate people if you don't know what is being looked for. And that goes, of course, for all of the harder roles in the EC and stuff like that. So how is that organized? And it's very much, as I understand it, a question of who knows somebody who needs a little nudge to step forward to take on a post.
Mhm.
How did you all think about attending this? Did you get the email, or was it through social media? Like, what drew you?
For me, it was by email.
Okay.
I went after attending Kai this year. I thought like I have to keep engaging with the community. So I went to the website, signed up to be a volunteer, and then I got emails since then.
Cool.
Yeah, I found out through an email as well.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Oldie but a goodie. Email is the way to go.
I know, right?
Yeah,
Social media, there's just too
see
much.
like many events happen over the weeks, like but I couldn't attend most of them because either I had like class conflicts or it was in a time that was not suitable to attend or something like that. But yeah, I've been meaning to attend, and today's been the first successful one where I could join.
That's great. And we'll also be doing more sessions in the next couple of months. So one will be more directed at like safety and equity more generally in conferences, because that's been an ongoing topic of concern. And then another one which we've invited Geraldine Fitzpatrick to talk about service, and that would be I think in the last week of November, something like that.
One thing that came up during the SIG events that happened during Kai was about how would we introduce new changes into the main conference. And one of the ideas was like do it in the other conferences like the XAI or the ones that are smaller conferences and which are growing. And then like I think it was particularly about the hybrid format in the conference, for example, and how we would experiment with that at scale. So if that is something to discuss in this group, I don't know, I'm just bringing it up, but yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's the one that Priya, you mentioned, right? The hybrid working group. So that is an event. Sorry, I'll let you.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was just saying, that I think is the one.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, well, thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing your ideas and for coming, and stay tuned. And if you do think of anything, feel free to put it in the Google Doc or send any of us an email. I'll put my email address in the chat.
There's one more on Friday, right? Friday morning, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Morning for some, yeah.
But yes, thank you all very much. And I hope to see all of you at a SIGCHI event at some point in the future.
See you around. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya.